All right. What's going on, everybody? Chris Franks with Texas West Capital. Welcome to Beards and Bitcoin. We'll be joined in a minute here with Mr. Andrew and Mr. Tillman, of course, my co-host here, giving you all the latest information coming in from just about every angle we can get it as far as Bitcoin goes, guys. Man, oh man, and before we pull them on, though, I wanted to talk to you guys real quick, and hopefully you guys are doing all right. By the way, real quick here, real quick. Go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, follow me, follow Andrew, follow Tillman. Their ats are under the show here on YouTube. If you need it, Andrew is at abacus_AP, and Mr. Tillman is at TexasOL61. I believe I got that right. If not, he'll come on here and yell at me, and we'll be all good. But yeah. Anyway, guys, hopefully y'all are doing all right. Let's check the chart real quick here. Bitcoin. Let me kind of pull this a little bit better here. There we go. Man, oh man, check that out. So we got the pullback at the Trading Academy. We're talking about this pullback to sweep this range low here right around the daily pivot here. And we did that. And today we're getting this great rally right on back up to the top of the larger range, as you can see. Looks really good. Looks like what we expect here. And so just based on the height overall of this the swing high here down to the swing low, minimally we should be looking up there on this Bitcoin all-time history index chart, up there around 87,590. So ultimately, guys, I think we get closer to 95, 100,000 before we have a real pullback, something like 25, 30%, if we get that much of a pullback. And then from there, of course, looking for further breakout. But man, oh man, I got to say, it's looking good here. I don't know what you guys think. By the way, hey, real quick, if you haven't, there's lots of real quicks this morning, right? If you haven't yet, I've got a new newsletter coming out starting next Monday called the Bitcoin Miner Stocks Report. As you guys know, I've been extremely bullish on Bitcoin miners for the last year and a half. If you listened to me back then about CLSK, CleanSpark, you would have nabbed you a 12x return already, guys. I've also talked about Riot and Mara and Wolf and a few others as well. This newsletter is going to come out every Monday. You're going to have weekly updates of all the Bitcoin miner stock charts, so like 18 plus of them. So, it's really going to be about how to make money trading them. But we're also going to, look at any information news that comes out from the industry every week. And then once a month, you're going to get access to a interview that I'm going to do with a researcher, an analyst, somebody involved in the Bitcoin mining space that'll give you maybe a deeper understanding of fundamentals and what maybe is what we're looking for as far as the future goes. Because in case you haven't been paying attention, miners have been diversifying into AI stuff, and it's more expensive, but it gives them a greater profit return. And so, yeah, it's not just Bitcoin mining for Bitcoin mining's sake, guys. Bitcoin miners for AI, hyperscaling, data centers, all this kind of stuff is going to be huge. So the link is underneath here. You can check it out. Would love to have you join up with that, guys, and get all that information. Let's go ahead and pull the guys on here, though. I see Andrew. I see Tillman. How are you doing today, gentlemen?
Doing real well. How are you doing, Chris?
Fantastic, man. Thanks for having us on.
Man, they just don't have the excitement and the that I have, do they? What's going on with this? All right. No, but really, man, what a week, okay? So almost $2 billion ETF inflows. And, of course, as we talked about last Wednesday, we had the second largest day ever, almost 900 million. Followed it up the next day with almost 500 million. Like I said, total 1.8, 1.9 billion for the week. And the other big news, of course, everybody's all interested in Iron right now, which is a Bitcoin miner who's really starting to diversify quite a bit into AI, as I was mentioning there. Some of them are. And that thing's up like 246% or something off the swing low, I believe, off the bear market low. Man, oh man, guys, just so much going on in Bitcoin right now. How are you guys feeling about it?
Becoming the base layer that we all think it is, right? Mining stocks are a leverage play on Bitcoin. That's been pretty clear since the beginning. And Bitcoin is the denominated value that people are measuring the value of that computing power against. And now it's being, accepted across multiple use cases, including AI. I do think that, there's a pinch point that we're going to see here in the future. I don't know when, but the pinch point is like there's a competition for rare resources that can produce this type of computational value or power. And AI is going to win that. There's no doubt about it. If you look there is no doubt about it to me, I would say, because the highest value, the orders of magnitude that it can move humanity forward in is greater than the security of a protocol that's been distributed by 95% of its inflationary curve. Those don't compete in my mind, nor in most of the people that I talk to's mind. And so what do we have to do as a Bitcoin community? We have to accept the fact that that computational power, that network, if you will, and the hash rate attached to it, it doesn't have to sever its ties with Bitcoin, but it should supplement its income with other income other than Bitcoin's mining profits. And I think that you're going to see real world incentives come to the table to bring people online from a mining capacity perspective that pushes the hash rate actually down, but a lot more decentralized or spread out, which ultimately will provide the same security and transactional power that we currently have with the Bitcoin network, but it won't be centralized into, quote, publicly traded mining stocks. It'll be decentralized into household appliances and things that don't try to chase the hash rate that we're currently trying to chase. And it made sense to chase it when you have 60% of the distribution available on chain to go grab. But when you have less than 5, probably model's going to be shifting. And that's, I think, what we're seeing here is a shift in the computational power seeking its highest and best use.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most interesting points that you continue to hammer home, man. When we talked a few times on my Friday show, and then of course on here, you keep pushing that idea that the computational power gets mass moved, out there, really decentralized in all these appliances, and I think that's one of the most unique narratives that I've heard as far as Bitcoin goes. As we continue to get to this point where, let's face it, it becomes almost, not worth it, for big companies to mine, because it's such a small return, basically. There's such a low margin. So I think that's a really great narrative, especially if people start to get concerned that maybe Bitcoin miners are going to find, a better way when they're diversifying into AI. As I mentioned earlier, it's a larger cost to them, but greater profit margins. And the one thing that most people don't understand about that is they have to actually retrofit or completely build, new data center areas, because the computational power, the way it's used in AI, is different than the way it's used with Bitcoin mining. So, that's the interesting. And I've noticed a few of them have different ways of going about it. But man, I think again, I was really, me, I'm all about the charts, and I was really bullish on Bitcoin miners, a year and a half ago coming into this. I remain extremely bullish on them.
Well, Chris, let me ask you a simple question. And I agree with you, by the way, but here it boils down to something that's more simple than I think people want to identify. And here's the simple question. Does a company hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
Right.
That's it. I mean, look at MicroStrategy. Look at the paradigm shift that we've experienced now in the markets, where the net income or the balance sheet, the income statement, aren't the only ways to value a company anymore. Look at GameStop. It's being valued in its cash position and really the nature of its virality at the moment.
Yeah.
That's a unique thing that hasn't happened in the past. And I would say that we're entering into an age where Bitcoin, countries, and specifically companies that add it to their balance sheet are going to reap the benefits of of really a lot of publicity and a lot of attention that otherwise they would not get, and for good reason, right? It gives you a backstop to the investment. For example, you invest in any company, the backstop is zero, right? The company can go out of business. The company can be non-existent in the future. And even big companies like Blockbuster, you can have a technological shift, and 3 years later, you didn't see the tidal wave, and you're underwater, right? And so there's this extinction event risk or catastrophic risk that's attached to any business. When you add Bitcoin to your balance sheet as a publicly traded company, you've diversified the risk at the very least. If you believe in Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, you've hedged against the risk to a large extent. So some could argue that if you take a large enough position, that has actually taken the primary value in terms of the potential appreciation of your share price as its modus operandum. Like, that is what's going to drive your price up if you take a larger, and we've seen that with some. So I just look at like the landscape of publicly traded companies that are going to at some point hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And right now, mining stocks are some of the heavily laden companies with Bitcoin. Like they're behind MicroStrategies and maybe a couple others that they are the holders, right?
Well, there's a medical device company a couple of weeks ago that decided to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. And when they announced it, their stock price went up like 40-some%.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Immediately. And it was a small company that, frankly, nobody had really ever heard of. The interesting thing with MicroStrategy is, if I had to guess, 90% of the people that are Bitcoin focused have absolutely no idea what MicroStrategy does other than be a Bitcoin holding company. Absolutely no idea. If you ask them, they could not tell you what they do from a business standpoint. It's a shifting of the narrative, right? And on Wall Street, sure, there's some numbers associated with stock price moving in the right direction. But oftentimes it's narrative and sentiment that really drives prices in a particular direction. Again, seeing that with GameStop, again, seeing it with a medical device company that nobody had ever heard of. And the minute they mention Bitcoin and they show that it's on their balance sheet, they shoot up in price. MicroStrategy is the Bitcoin narrative associated with going up in price. And it's going to continue. You could also make the case that a company like Block, which used to be Square, Jack Dorsey's company, they have a real Bitcoin narrative associated with their firm, putting out a unique wallet and hard wallet, cold storage type wallet that can connect and make it easier for you to handle that portion of holding Bitcoin. Again, a plus for their narrative. There's a case to be made, and I know Tillman has talked about this before, that the decentralization of mining, at some point that has to happen. Well, if you think about it, what does Block/Square do? They have a lot of tiny machines across small businesses across the country and across the globe. Is there a way at some point that Jack Dorsey adds to that hardware, software, the ability to, in some sort of tick, tick, tick kind of way, that inside of those machines, you have the ability to mine Bitcoin? Like, that would be a big time decentralizing opportunity for that firm. And again, what would the narrative be associated with that firm and an adjustment in how people see how that company makes money? It would be significant. It wouldn't surprise me if that's on the radar of a guy like Jack Dorsey. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, for people that are looking like, okay, where's my edge, in the stock market? What kind of information? How can I think? I think, man, you guys are absolutely fantastic way of thinking about it for anybody listening in. Obviously we don't know whether this is going to happen or not, guys, but when you consider, if you've been listening to Tillman speak about this, and makes a lot of sense. And then, as Andrew says, you bring in somebody like Block, who has all those little machines everywhere, throughout the world, kind of going in here. I mean, man, If you were looking for a speculative play, 5-10 years down the road, this might be something you go, oh my God, I remember them talking about on episode 3 of Beards and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And man, oh man, look what happened now. So obviously do your own research, but damn, right?
Well, let's point even further to this thesis, right? So I've been following the crypto Twitterverse as it pertains to Donald Trump and the meeting that took place with the mining industry yesterday, right?
Yeah.
It's this great narrative that everybody wants to buy into. But my question would be is, if let's just say that Donald Trump wins, that thesis is what their outcome is. And if that's the case, and we're going to quote, hold it sovereignly on the US balance sheet, we're going to take a position in Bitcoin. And that's going to drive this narrative that everybody else in the world is also going to take a position because we're the leader. And that all sounds really good. But just like the situation in Taiwan, where we have a vested interest in protecting the semiconductor space and the concentration risk that exists in Taiwan, the same thing exists in the ASIC space. So ASIC miners are the only thing that matters. They are the ones that are producing the high yields. They're the ones that all the public mining stocks have in their warehouses, and they come from 3 manufacturers, and they're all in China. So if we have this grandiose plan to be the world's leader in Bitcoin production, it has to start with us producing ASICs here domestically. And we're so far behind the 8 ball on that, it would be the equivalent of us, trying to catch up on a 100-meter swim, and we're 50 meters back. I mean, it can be done, but man, it will be an effort, because if we're going to chase hash rate into infinity on the Bitcoin network, we are behind the 8 ball, to say the least. So I think this notion of like Bitcoin being the public chain has to start with, where can you right now, if it's a public chain and we're going to make it decentralized to its fullest, right? Because that should be our mission. That was Satoshi's mission, is for it to be a decentralized network. So if we're going to say that that's the case, then we should be able to walk to the corner store, the equivalent of the proverbial Radio Shack, and we should be able to buy an appliance or a piece of equipment that has a small mining device or some hash rate functionality embedded into it. That will be the future, in my opinion. And so if you talk about like things to look for in the market, that I'm looking for the first manufacturer of household equipment that uses the off hours or the overnight hours where electricity is inexpensive to produce hash, to contribute to the network. If a major manufacturer came out and said that, man, I would be all over that. I would feel like that would be a absolute lock, in terms of, at the very least, betting on somebody who sees the future as clearly as I do, which is, I guess, the first place I start in terms of, looking for a potential investment, is management and their vision. So I just think this notion that we're going to take over Bitcoin has to start with the mining capacity. And it'd be no different than if I told you, we're going to back our dollar with gold, or we're going to hold a certain portion of our sovereignty on our balance sheet in an investment in Bitcoin, right? In gold, excuse me. If that was the case, but every manufacturer of heavy excavation equipment was in China, and we had never produced an excavator before, or a large ute hauler, or any of these other major pieces of equipment that are needed to produce gold. If we had never done that, it would be really foolish for us to not start there. Like, we should probably start producing our equipment here domestically if we're going to rely on the price of that asset as a store of value on our balance sheet. Like that would be my notion. And so, yeah, I think it sounds really good for political reasons, and I'm all for, the more people talking about Bitcoin, right? So that's the objective, is that more people are getting exposed to this notion of like, hey, why are people talking about it? So that's all a good thing. But I do think it's important to kind of peel back the onion as you do with anything in life, and really look at the nuts and bolts of how the machine's kept together, and make sure you're maintaining that machine properly before you start driving at 150 miles an hour down the road.
Yeah. And I think maybe for even the layman out here in crypto Twitter and, FinTwit and whatever, I think it becomes even maybe more of an interesting idea because, everybody's kind of hovering around this end of the petrodollar idea now. And of course, everybody expects the dollar to die tomorrow. Even if it is the end of the petrodollar, it's going to take a while before the dollar kind of comes down. But when we're looking at that, we're looking at BRICS on the other side of the U.S., and that's, China and Russia basically, kind of trying to build this, we're based on gold kind of idea. And then, as you mentioned, three main manufacturers of the ASIC miners, and they're all in China. So it kind of gives another, again, interesting narrative. If we even kind of extrapolate all that into this more macro worldwide sense of what's going on politically between nations, and overall finance and whatnot. So yeah,
well, if I could interrupt you a little bit even on that, because I think that as Bitcoin people, we like to see Bitcoin on center stage in every discussion, but it's not even close to center stage in these discussions. You will never get Bitcoin to be a store of value that has a higher leverage value than the GDP of a country. Or the natural resources in a country that it possesses, or any of the commodities that come out of that country, right? Why? Well, because corn grows every year. There's a yield to it that Bitcoin doesn't have. And that's what people, even in the Bitcoin community, have a hard time sometimes swallowing, like why guys like Warren Buffett hate Bitcoin. It's not because Warren Buffett's an idiot. Right? We can all acknowledge that Warren Buffett is not an idiot, but he has a rule, and that rule is this. That rule is I don't invest in anything that doesn't have a yield every year, that doesn't have a reoccurring cash flow attached to it that I can count on with absolute certainty, or a great deal of certainty, or with insured certainty. That's why he owns insurance companies. So there's this false mentality, I think, in everyone that loves Bitcoin's mind, that it's going to be the single asset that rules them all. That's, in my estimation, foolish. I think it will be one of the assets that help determine the trustworthiness and the relationship that structures trade, right? That's what happens now with all of the commodities produced, right? If we produce oil and a country needs oil, what do? Well, we find out what we need from them, and then we may settle in some cash on top of that. That's exactly what's going to take place, because I do think there will be circles of transactions and markets that you will not be able to trade in unless you have some Bitcoin. So it'll force people to adopt it, right, at some level.
There's I look at narratives associated with Bitcoin and talking about the scale at which it will grow to, and some of the assets that it may quote unquote replace. I agree with Tillman that the idea that somehow globally, or the United States, takes on a quote unquote Bitcoin standard. I think that's pie in the sky type stuff. And it's stuff that's interesting to talk about at a conference or two. But it's not a meaningful, short, midterm, even long-term reality. But there are other realities, right? So there are other commodities that it can and will replace. Like, for all intents and purposes, it's moved on beyond the commodity like silver. At some point, it will move beyond the commodity that is gold, and I believe that. And so, because it just has significantly more, the supply-demand story, the sovereignty story, and then on top of that, the story associated with it being an immutable, type of asset that can be owned and stored in a way, and then can be verified. Gold, different types of gold storage. There's a lot that can be said, and a lot can be talked about how much gold actually exists associated with the paper gold that's out there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think at some point, Bitcoin overtakes, gold as a, from a market cap type of deal. And with that being said, I mean, that takes Bitcoin into, borderline, millions, per coin.
Well, I mean, you could even, Andrew, I completely agree with what the trail of logic that you're going on. And I would even say one step further is like, you could compare it to a lot of assets. Real estate, for example, and I've heard this analogy, I can't remember from where, so don't kill me that it's not mine, but that buying Bitcoin is as close to buying real estate in Manhattan 300 years ago, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's this notion that there's only so much of it, and that over time, not measured in our lifetime, but over generations and generations and generations, that it will be identified as something that has scarcity, that's fungible, and that you can transact permissionless, right? And so those things, I do think, have a lot of similarities to real estate, right? And you can extrapolate a real estate, market cap of it around $200 trillion plus. So it's not even outside of my realm of thinking that it goes to those heights. It would be, top of the scale for me in terms of what I could imagine. But I will say, even at that level, you do not see sovereign nations dealing in commercial or residential real estate against their sovereign debt needs. Like, that's not what they leverage, right? They leverage us. They leverage our ingenuity and our earning capability and how dominant we will be in innovation in the world in the next 25 years. That's what they're leveraging. And the more the world buys it, the more credit we get. And they're also leveraging the military might that they've also been able to accumulate over that time period. So, I mean, I completely agree with you. And the heights that this could reach are infinitely bigger than I think, anyone 10 years ago could have thought, or maybe a few select people. But you're talking about still not being at the sovereign debt level, even if you replace real estate.
Well, if you drill down and you think about shifting narratives over time, over a 3, 5, and 10-year period from today going forward, right? So if you're somebody that's been, that has a percentage of your assets in gold, and you're a 62-year-old guy, and you've got a portfolio worth $47 million, right? And 3% of that are in gold ETFs. But you start doing a little bit of research, you start hearing from your wealth management team, and you hear it a couple quarters, and finally you look at it and you say, well, wait a minute. I can invest in a Bitcoin ETF like Bitwise, where they will show me their Bitcoin wallet, and I know exactly how many Bitcoin is in that fund without question, right? Whereas I've got a Bitcoin ETF, I've got a gold ETF over here, and they don't do anything like that. Like, that's just, I'm just taking their word for it, and it's effectively, paper gold. There's no actual real world asset behind it other than, what I think the market's going to do on any given day. That narrative, over a period of time, you're going to see large amount. We've seen it in a small way already, right? So we saw in the first quarter obviously a significant uptake in the Bitcoin ETFs, while at the same time we saw outflows from gold ETFs, right? We saw that happening. So that's a micro movement from gold into Bitcoin. And I think in that, 55 to 80-year-old space in the wealth management world, and they're having, quarterly meetings with their wealth management team. And there's, 2 people sitting there that have the 50 million bucks, and there's 8 other people that manage their money. That narrative will be a part of the conversation more and more and more and more. And that's why you're going to see that movement out of that particular commodity into Bitcoin continue to really, really pick up the pace. And that's just, again, one layer of the narrative associated with Bitcoin. That's just one little layer. There's like 9 layers that you can speak to that say, probably higher prices from here. It's hilarious to me to watch crypto Twitter freak out when Bitcoin bounces below 67 in the last 48 hours. Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, and then it moves to 69 and then people are not bearish anymore. And I'm like, guys, we are literally ranging in a 1.5% to 2% level at the absolute peak of where we've ever been before this cycle. Like that's amazing stuff.
But that Andrew, you're the people that you just described. The system is designed to create liquidity.
Sure.
Whether it's through boredom or whether it's through fear or greed. And those are the people that will sell. Those are the people that will cough it up and then go, oh, and guess why I know that? Because you're looking at one of those people. That's the nature of the beast. That's literally the game of emotion that I think a lot of people don't understand about the markets. Like, the markets are designed to take advantage of emotion, whether it's good emotion or quote bad emotion. Emotion in the markets is bad. It's both bad. If you're feeling real great about yourself because you made a bunch of money, I promise it's a bad feeling that you're living into. And if it's horrible and you're losing, I promise you're probably telling yourself a whole bunch of stuff that's bad on that front. And so the question becomes, how do you remain successful? And the only thing I've found in my life, and it's a Warren Buffett thing, is like zoom out. Like, stop trying to look at the chart under minute candles.
Well, I think all of us on here are old enough to go back to 2008, 2009, and when just asset prices across every asset was seriously depressed, right? And I can go back and I can look at I remember having a limit buy order for Bank of America stock at like $2.17. I'm not kidding, right? And it was at 225, and I was watching it in real time during the crisis. Like, I want it to fill, I want it to fill, I want it to fill. It didn't fill, right? Well, Bank of America is significantly higher than $2.25 now, right? Same thing with like Fifth Third Bank Corp. It was like at 99 cents, right? 99 cents in 08 and 09. And you can go round and round, and that's associated with emotion, right? Like, there was not a reality or a world where the United States was going to allow Bank of America to go under. Like, no chance, right? But still, people were selling it like crazy, bidding it down to $2. So
I think what's really great about this cycle, and especially people that are new or maybe have only been through one cycle with Bitcoin, I think they fail to appreciate that this is the cycle where everything changes, right? So up into this point, Bitcoin has been purely about speculation. There's been like, oh yeah, it could do this, it could do that. But it's really this cycle where it's starting to get legitimacy, where mainstream attention is really starting to hit, right? We got spot ETFs, though, it's not in kind, it's cash, but whatever. We still got it. We've got, it's basically the big thing they're talking about more than anything else right now when it comes to the presidential election coming up this year. Bitcoin miners, again, diversifying from Bitcoin mining, also adding in, the whole hyperscaling AI, data center idea, right? And then, of course, again, as we kind of look into the future, where does this go? As Tillman's talked about, into other appliances and whatnot. I think this is the narrative that most everybody is really just missing right now. This is, when we look at technological adoption, it usually follows that S curve, right? And that big middle part of that S curve is that mainstream adoption. And so the last cycle, I said that it was likely this cycle that we'd be talking about ETFs, that we'd be looking at more mainstream adoption, institutional getting involvement and whatever into it. And that, to me, that is that big part of that S curve, right? That's that mainstream adoption area. And so if we continue to think on that, it's interesting that we go into the miners and we go, okay, so we're getting into that. Miners, of course, are consolidating. We had Riot attempt the hostile takeover of Bitfarms, and they're still trying to, talk their way into that. We had, who was it? Let me see here. Core Scientific with CoreWeave. They signed that 12-year contract to deliver 200 or so megawatts of infrastructure to CoreWeave. And then a few days after that, CoreWeave's like, hey, here's $1 billion. We want you. And they're like, we think, you're undervaluing us. And so, as we get into this mainstream adoption, every cycle, as we've talked about before, when you get to the halving, you have the consolidation of the miners. But I think especially this time around, as we kind of hit that mainstream, we're down to 3.5 Bitcoin now is the reward now. I think it really gets interesting that maybe we're kind of hitting that peak with that consolidation into then maybe that expansion across, appliances and whatnot as the mainstream adoption really kicks in. And just, me from a markets perspective, having gone through, 30 years of markets. I know, Andrew, I think you're up there near my age somewhere, maybe. I think Tillman's a little younger than us here, but, coming up through, if you think about the 90s, even 87, even 87 where we had the drop there, and then into the 90s when we had there.
Black Monday.
Yeah. And then 2001, we had dot-com bubble, and then we saw the running up into 2008 with the mortgages and the banks and all that. And then here we are on this secular bull run since 2009, since March of 2009, where this thing just keeps on pushing up and pushing up. And it's just from somebody who really enjoys looking at the markets and understanding and seeing how technology develops, I think, man, this has been absolutely just this crazy, something I never thought I would get to experience in my lifetime. And most especially so in the last, maybe 5 to 7 years with Bitcoin. And as it's kind of, matured and gotten in there. And so I know I'm pretty excited about it. Hopefully everybody on here is pretty excited about it as well. I trade. So I'm interested, I'm interested at times.
There are some additional narratives associated with the political side of things, right? So if we make there's two types of assumptions. If Trump wins the election, that's going to bring an enormous amount of innovation and the opening up of markets even further associated with Bitcoin as the sort of base layer asset associated with options, lending, derivatives, all of those things that will serve to push more assets into Bitcoin. If he doesn't win, well, then we're back to a narrative that is Bitcoin is unkillable, right? You can't kill Bitcoin no matter what you try to do with it. But that will limit Bitcoin's upward momentum over a period of time versus the alternative of Trump from a political standpoint. So, keeping those two different scenarios in mind, but still both of those scenarios are higher. It's just a question of the velocity of the higher, right? On the Trump side of things, again, options haven't been approved yet to trade for the spot Bitcoin ETFs. When that happens, it's going to be another rush of capital that jumps into the fray. And for all intents and purposes, speculation, right? But speculation does move price. It does move markets. It does broaden markets, right? You're going to see additions of, 2x long spot, 3x long spot, 2x short spot. Again, that's all money that gets pushed into a washing machine that is associated with Bitcoin itself. So there are narratives here, and the narratives are either a standstill sort of slow growth movement if the current political regime stays in place, or a fairly significant explosion. So think about it this way, a bunch of Bitcoin miners meeting with Trump, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that that's an industry that is given a bunch of tax incentives, a bunch of incentives to grow, because Trump is now aware, as Tillman has made clear so many times, that it's completely centralized in China. That's kind of a thing for him. He's not a big fan of something like that, right? So maybe he, work some stuff out with those guys and say, hey, here's a bunch of incentives, grow as fast as you can. So we're taking away from, sort of the stranglehold that China has in the creation of these machines. So again, a lot of open road opportunities and possibilities associated with political outcomes.
What a time to be alive. It's interesting nonetheless, either way, it's
so crazy. And I think the thing is, a lot of people, of course, again, are emotional, right? We're emotional on markets. We make emotional decisions in life, whether it's with our job, a business, purchases that we make, relationships we're in, right? It's human beings. It's what makes us humans, our emotions, right? And I think it's interesting when we look at that and, the people that are, either they hate Biden or they hate Trump. I don't think most people are kind of like just neutral between them. You like either hate Biden or you hate Trump or you hate them both. But from a personal standpoint, so because of their emotional attachment or disattachment to the particular political person there, they come up with a reason why, it's not going to work, right? So if you hate Trump, it's like, he's just saying it to get votes and he may not do it.
But here's the great. Yeah, I agree with you. And here it's everybody has to make promises on the front end, and he may not live up to them. But it's a really brilliant strategy if you think about it. And here's my whole thing. Like, I look for intelligence, right? Who's not playing dirty and who's playing a really intelligent game. And the hardest thing for politicians to do is to pick up new voters, pick up people from the other side. That's like the holy grail. And you don't even have to be very effective for a campaign to be deemed very successful in conversions, right? Because it's the hardest thing to do. So in basically taking a hard stance on Bitcoin, he definitely has pulled people who value Bitcoin above their political views into his camp,
And he doesn't even have to really understand it. I don't for a second believe that Trump and Biden, well, maybe more Trump than Biden, really understand Bitcoin, because let's face it, most of the people in crypto Twitter or whatever really don't understand it, right? They got a very limited top level understanding of it. But the thing is, they don't have to, right? The people they have, rather being president doesn't mean you're making all the decisions. You've got this whole group of
it's not any different than does Trump understand how to make an electric car?
Yeah.
No. But he probably has a pretty good understanding of there's opportunity for the United States and its citizens to be on the forefront of this movement, which is good for tax receipts and the increasing of income with a certain section of voters, right? Same thing with Bitcoin, same thing with Bitcoin mining, same thing with incentives associated with creating, again, hash rate across a certain level of devices. I saw something the other day, Apple had an announcement for their WWDC and it was mostly focused on software.
Yeah.
And a guy that I follow, MKBHD, Marcus Brownlee, who's probably one of the biggest YouTubers in the world, he does a lot of in-depth stuff and has been doing it for a long, long time. And he'll find little things inside of announcements. And Apple did something inside of a few of their devices. I think their iPhone and their iPad. And he said, well, this thing is coming because it's inside of the device already. It's coded into the software, but they haven't turned it on yet. And so 2 or 3 cycles down the road, they will turn it on. He's like, they did this with the iPod years ago. The first 2 iPods had Bluetooth connectivity inside of it, but they hadn't turned it on yet. They were waiting for a refresh of a refresh, and then they flipped on the switch. So same thing with the opportunity associated with hash rate proliferated amongst, a bunch of different devices. You could have manufacturers, you could have forward-thinking types of folks like a Jack Dorsey, like an Elon Musk, that may be building this already, and it's included in some way, shape, or form in their next version of devices, but it's not turned on yet for some reason or another. Maybe they're waiting for an incentive. Maybe they're waiting for, who knows what they're waiting for. but you could do it and include it in the devices. And it's just, it's a software update that then flips that proverbial switch.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And again, guys, I know most of y'all listening aren't, analysts at hedge funds and whatnot, but this is the kind of forward thinking that you look to do. If you're looking, to invest in something, right? And you're looking to say, okay, if I'm going to look at it fundamentally, what is the play here? What is the real play? It's never what's going on at the moment. It's never what everybody's talking about, in the next couple of years. It's what goes beyond that. That's the real one. That's the one that turns, a little bit of interest into like true wealth. And so hopefully, I mean, you guys are getting a master course on this right here from these guys. Hopefully you're paying attention and it's really expanding your thought process on what Bitcoin could actually become, on what it, not even just Bitcoin become, but what it leads to, right? It's not about Bitcoin for Bitcoin's sake.
No.
It's what, as I've been saying, base layer, right? What happens with it now? And that I think is where we're going to see like companies that, well, maybe some like Block now that we kind of know about, but I think a lot of companies that we've never even heard of that maybe not even be around at the moment here in the next 10 years are just going to be like, we'll be talking about like we talk about NVIDIA right now, just this blowout, like, oh my God, I wish I had bought, 10 years ago or something. And I really love that. I love that you guys are helping people here think through that because, again,
AI is going to change everything.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've used ChatGPT, but even for the smallest use cases like me in trying to come up with a gluten-free menu for the week, like it's so far beyond the previous version of itself, Google, that imagine being able to go with the largest computational power to an underdeveloped country and say, here are your value points resource wise, and here is the plan to extrapolate as much value naturally out of your resources without leaning on one other country for sovereign for debt purposes, including the IMF. And by the way, all we want paid on performance. We just want a cut of the action on those resources. That's a no-brainer for every country on earth that because the delta of efficiency in terms of execution value in getting that money recognized, only that tool can provide it. Only that tool can provide it. And so if you look at like its highest and best use, computing power as a whole, we're going to see deltas of change and deltas of efficiency harvested out of every industry, every country, every manufacturing, everything, right? And so the question I always ask myself is, okay, where's the weakest point in that supply chain or in that production to market? And if you look at like Bitcoin, for example, Bitcoin, what are you dependent upon for Bitcoin? You're dependent upon the miners. So where does that start? Well, that starts with the raw materials that are included in the production of the ASICs. So look at who's the leaders there and whether there's market share to be had, right? And then you go one leg up and you go, okay, who's taking those raw materials and producing the miners, the ASICs? Is there a dominant market force there? And is there an inevitability that efficiency will come into that space based upon a need for diversification against the interests of the network itself, but also based upon natural incentives, on-chain incentives based upon the appreciation of Bitcoin? So all these things are at play at every level up the chain. And so a lot of people look at Bitcoin's price as the whole number. You got to go and look at everything else. And so if I'm looking at the future and I'm looking at like what's sound investment, to y'all's point, there are so many fragmentations that are going to come off of crypto and off of AI that are entire industries we haven't even thought of yet that we haven't even
Absolutely.
considered that are going to happen in the next 5 to 6 years. And they're going to come out of nowhere and they're going to take the markets by storm. And we're all going to be going, man, this is, and the earlier you can recognize that pattern of adoption into this new network, right? Whether it be hash rate functionality in the form of public miners. We've seen how fast those companies have grown, right? But that's just one sliver of a million slivers that are going to take place as Bitcoin becomes this base layer of innovation.
Yeah. No, I love it. Definitely.
And all of this,
I just hope everybody's listening and really kind of, this is going through their heads because, even me, listening to you guys has even got me thinking beyond what I was already thinking, and some ideas. And it's just, absolutely great stuff.
All of these are reasons why, too, by the way, that, the price of Bitcoin for the last 45 days has stayed above 60K, because there are a bunch of people a lot smarter than us, or at least they're supposed to be smarter than us at the BlackRocks of the world, that are sitting around having the exact same conversations and saying, how can we get as much as we possibly can into our products? And then, oh, by the way, proliferate our ETF, our spot ETF, into our other ETFs from a performance standpoint, because all of these narratives are true. So, these people are thinking that way, or else they'd find ways to say, oh, we're kind of hitting an all-time high. Let's trim our position just a little bit. And that is not what's happening at all. And so, these narratives are they're being talked about and planned for at these organizations. It's cool stuff. It's really cool stuff.
And I think if you probably most people coming in here have thought, oh, it was BlackRock ETF was all about the ETF, but I think it is the beginning of, okay, BlackRock's thinking again. You got to understand, very, very intelligent people, right? Really advanced degrees where I'm thinking through this, right? A lot of business experience, seeing all this, and it's the idea of, okay, if we can bring Bitcoin to the ETF and we can create this spot ETF, that again, makes it more mainstream adoption. Where does that lead? It starts that movement into these bigger, more capital intensive, more capital return kind of events.
For those quote unquote smart people, it's very different. So if we're wrong on this podcast over the next 6 months, people can make comments, inside of our Twitter accounts and, okay, that hurt my feelings, right? Well, at BlackRock, this is billions upon billions of dollars of bets and careers. If they're wrong, that's an entirely different set of consequences, right? So, again, think that through.
But there's no risk for them. This is the same blueprint. They've built this house 1,000 times before. This is like, here's the blueprint. How do you legitimize something in the United States? You let people borrow against it. That's what they've done. That's literally step one. What do I mean by that? Well, 2 years ago, if you held any position in Bitcoin, it was unborrowable, except for ridiculous on-chain dual signature, crazy stuff. This is the first opportunity for you to take a position in Bitcoin and have it backed by the system and borrow against it. And look at real estate. Why is real estate so important to the wealth of American citizens? It's because we can borrow against it. It's because everyone recognizes you can take it to any bank in the country. If you don't like bank A, you can take it to bank B and you go, hey, I've got a free and clear, no mortgage, $3.5 million commercial piece of real estate that's producing this. Can I borrow against it? And you walk out of there with cash in hand, right? So there's this print that's been set up that these people don't have to re-engineer. They're just following it, which is get the base layer to a place where you can borrow against it. And guess what? We're here.
There we go. Well, one quick question before we're done here, guys. This has been an amazing hour of conversation. I think anybody that's missed this is really missing out. But question. So we had, again, last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, we had the second largest inflow day for ETFs. What do you guys think on the break? And now, obviously, we all kind of agree that there's going to be bigger days in the future,
Sure.
Q4, maybe into Q3, whatever, coming in as the bigger players get in there and more players get in because they saw, all these guys doing it here, in the first quarter. So, but what do you guys think? We break through a new all-time high. Do you think we make a new all-time high daily inflow record for the ETFs?
I think we do that sometime in the next probably 90 days. We'll have another new all-time high for inflows because that pushes outside of the sell in May and go away. That gets us back into August, September, and you'll probably see a new all-time high in inflows sometime late August, early September. I think that's a bet that I'm willing to stake. Not really anything on other than my word. But then on top of that, I would say, in terms of the price of Bitcoin, I like Tom Lee. He's a guy that I respect. I've actually spent personal time with Tom Lee in New York City and his staff and his team. They do a really great job at Fundstrat. And, he's staked his claim that 150K by the end of the year. I won't go that far, but I do think we hit all-time highs, and I think we push into the 80s, probably late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and into the end of the year. But I think we're higher, certainly at some point this year than we are right now. It's not really that hard to be. We're about 5% away from a new all-time high anyways.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's never been a bad time to accumulate Bitcoin.
Right.
Never. Literally never. So that's the way that people should be looking at it. Accumulate Bitcoin, because at some point in the future, it's going to be higher than where you bought it.
Yeah. So go out there, buy some Bitcoin with whatever extra cash you got there. Go outside, mow a lawn, do something to bring in some more income, some more cash, buy some more Bitcoin, have that longer term, 3, 5, 10, 20-year outlook. And just keep adding that position. Gary Cardone, I think, talks about it best. He's definitely, been one to put his money where his mouth is. I don't know if you guys have been following along. He sold one of his mansions there for a couple of million, put that into Bitcoin, trying to sell his brand new Land Rover, to put that in there as well and do what. But, he talks about it as, most people are looking at, okay, if I get into Bitcoin here, I'm looking at the price. And he's saying, listen, I'm looking at this for the future of my children, for wealth building, for whatnot. And so what I'm interested in is how many Bitcoin can I get? How much of it can I get? It's not, I don't care about the price.
It's a game. Yeah. He's gamifying it for himself.
I've got a total number I'm looking at. And
I look at it as this, Tillman and I run a company, and we'll plug it here in the next 5 seconds. thearchpublic.com. Go there, because sometime in the next 90 days, we're going to come out with a Bitcoin focused algorithm. You can do all the stuff that we're talking about here. But even we keep some, Bitcoin on our balance sheet, and it would be smart for us to do that on a go forward basis, right? Because of the positive effects associated with supply and demand, and the positive effects associated with how the perception of how the money is managed associated with what we do. Right. And I think that is going to be a narrative that certainly is a front and center narrative associated with the push of Bitcoin higher. That every time a company comes out and says, we're adding this to our balance sheet, there's an immediate push higher for the value of that business. So if you're a business of scale that has the ability to do that, I think slowly and then really quickly, there's going to be a sizable amount of companies that do that. And I think that over the next 6 to 12, 18 months will be a sizable narrative of what happens with Bitcoin.
I couldn't agree more. And my thoughts on Bitcoin and price specifically are like you standing at the ocean and trying to guess which wave is going to be the biggest. Like, oh, the next wave is going to be the biggest wave. It's a futile cause in a lot of cases. It's pretty easy though to walk down to the beach and go, are the waves bigger today than they were yesterday? And that's something that can be easily determined. And if you walk down to the beach of Bitcoin, you will find that the waves are bigger every single day. And that's the way I look at it. So I don't care whether on any given day I can pick the biggest wave that's going to push us to the all-time high. I just look at every day I look at Bitcoin, it's bigger. It's in bigger circles with bigger influence, with bigger money, with, you know, all those things. And so if you just know the world and the way it works, the people who are the richest, right? The richest people in the world, they have one philosophy around their money, which is diversification. You cannot go broke if you spread your wealth over an infinite number or a lot of asset classes that have inverse proportionate gain loss to them, like inversely correlated. And if you do that with a really well thought out strategy, all you're doing is cycling cash from the losers that you purchased when no one's talking about them and their dogs, and you just have to put another 3% of your net worth into something, right? That's when everybody's going, Bitcoin's going to zero and it's at $3,000. That's when people are just like, well, I got to put it in something that everybody hates right now. Put 3% in there. They're not thinking, oh, that 3% is going to make me rich. They're already rich. They don't care. They're just looking at the diversification value that it brings to the table. And if you look at those people, right, and you look at them putting 3% of their net worth into Bitcoin, it's more impactful than all of us putting 60% of our net worth into Bitcoin. That's right. So that's the waves getting bigger, in my opinion, every day.
That's right. That's right. Well, listen, guys, it's been our hour, so I think we're going to get out of here, man. Absolutely. Again, I got to say, we're three episodes into this podcast, and I think this has by far been the best one. I think there's so much for the average retail trader, retail investor to really learn. If they watch this and pay attention to what's been said, as far as what's potentially, the future, how to think about the future even. I think that's the best thing because it's not only applied here with Bitcoin, but anything else they're looking at, in the markets and in life. So, man, I really appreciate you guys today. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Everybody, listen, you can follow Andrew at AP_abacus on Twitter there, X, whatever the hell it's called these days. Tillman's going to be Texas OG 61, OL 61. God dog it, I always want to say OG. Texas OL 61. If he just said the ugly guy at the ugly guy, we'd all know.
Oh man,
we're going to take a shot for the last show, right?
You're killing him.
Spoken like a Red Raider. That is exactly what I expect out of a Red Raider. That's it.
But seriously, I keep getting it wrong. It's either the number or the, I go and I always say OG, right? Because Tillman is OG. Dude's been around Bitcoin for quite a while.
Listen, that's my original AOL email back in the day. It stands for Texas OL 61. It's OL offensive line. It's I'm pragmatic.
By the way, if you guys don't believe him, go Google Tillman Holloway there, UT, University of Texas. You'll see his pretty face up there from back in the day. And we won't give him too much a hard time for being a Longhorn. That's all right. It's right up the road from here, though A&M's a little bit closer. Really far from my alma mater. I can't even say that. Up in the Panhandle area, North Texas. But anyway, man, great conversation. Love these guys. I hope you guys love it as well. Do me a favor, follow them. Check out thearchpublic.com. Check out the group coaching we have over there at TWC Trading Academy. Sign up for my newsletter. I've got a free newsletter every week, guys. The Market Breakdown. You can get it at themarketbreakdown.com. We look at charts and information from the various markets, from that week. Try to find stuff that's really interesting, help you understand concepts maybe that are more esoteric or, deeper, and you can't really get a lot of layman understanding of them. And also check out Bitcoin stock market. No, Bitcoin buy Bitcoin. I just launched this, guys. First issue comes out next Monday. Bitcoin miner stocks report.com/upgrade. And you can join in on that. And you're going to get a whole hell of a lot more information about the different Bitcoin miners. It's going to be just around understanding how to make money trading and investing in the Bitcoin miners. We're going to have fundamental stuff on there. Interviews every month. I'm going to get Tillman on there here in the probably in our second month there. I've got Juan Leon. We're going to shoot an interview with him. He's the research over there at Bitwise Investments. And he was just recently talking about Bitcoin miners and what his thoughts are about the future with all that. So a lot of, people with experience, people with the research and the analyst skills coming at you. And you'll only be able to get that stuff there as part of that. So jump on over there, guys. We've got a wealth of things that can help you guys out between us. But definitely follow us all there on Twitter and say hi. Tell Tillman he's pretty, and he'll feel good for the next week. And then,
thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having us on, my man.
All right, guys. Y'all take
Had
care.
A lot of fun.
Everybody else, have a great week. We appreciate you guys joining in as always. Share it. Let people know about it. And man, oh man, I guess we will see you next Wednesday, folks, right?
You bet.
Yep.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.